Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's English story. Imagine this. It's the late 1500s. No phones, no internet, no TV. People are riding horses, riding with feathers, and trying not to get sick from, well, everything. But in the middle of all that, there's one guy walking around with a pen and a big imagination. His name? William Shakespeare. Yeah, you've heard the name. Maybe in school, maybe in a movie, maybe from someone quoting lines like, "Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind," or "Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them." That's him. Shakespeare isn't just some old writer people talk about in English class. He was one of the most creative minds in history. He wrote about love, fear, dreams, power, jealousy, all the things people still feel today. He was smart, bold, and full of ideas. And somehow, his words still live on, even after 400 years. But who was he, really? How did a regular kid from a small town become the most famous writer in the English language? And why do people still study his work, make movies out of it, and quote his lines without even knowing? And if you're learning English, what could you possibly get from this guy who lived so long ago? That's what this story is about. This is an English shadowing exercise. To get value from it, you must practice, not just listen. You don't need to be perfect. Just stay consistent and repeat. Listen carefully. Pause when needed. Repeat each sentence out loud. The sentences in this story are kept simple and clear, so they're easier to follow and shadow as you listen. Don't stress about being perfect. Progress comes from repetition, not perfection. We're going to explore Shakespeare's life, the things he created, the strange facts around him, and how he still connects to the way we speak, feel, and express ourselves today. Let's start where it all began, in a little town with a long name, Stratford-upon-Avon. William Shakespeare was born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, a quiet town in England with more sheep than excitement. He was the third of 8 kids, and his father, John Shakespeare, worked as a glove maker. Yeah, gloves. Not the most thrilling family business, but it paid the bills for a while. His family was doing okay at first. Not rich, but not poor either. His dad even got into local politics, which sounds impressive until the money trouble started. Over time, the family lost status and things got tougher. But young William was already showing signs of something different. We don't know everything about his childhood, but it's likely he went to a local grammar school. There, he would have learned Latin, classical literature, and how to read and write, skills that would seriously pay off later. And even though we imagine Shakespeare as this genius with a feather pen, back then, he was just a kid trying to make sense of life like everyone else. Now, here's where things get interesting. At just 18 years old, Shakespeare got married. His wife, Anne Hathaway, was 26, 8 years older than him. Not super common in those days. And to make things more dramatic, she was already pregnant. So yeah, Shakespeare started adult life fast. They had 3 kids together, a daughter, Susanna, and later, twins named Hamnet and Judith. And then he disappears. No, seriously, there are about 7 years of his life where nobody really knows what happened. Historians literally call it the lost years. One day he's a new dad in Stratford. The next time we see his name, he's suddenly in London writing plays. Some people think he was teaching. Others say he was acting or working with traveling theater groups. Some even think he ran off to escape trouble. But whatever happened during those years, it clearly shaped him. Because when he shows up again, he's not just some guy from a small town. He's on his way to becoming a legend in the world of theater. So now we're in the early 1590s, and Shakespeare is in London. Somehow, this guy from a small town is writing plays, and people are noticing. At first, it's not all fame and glory. He's probably acting in small roles, maybe working backstage. But his writing? That's what makes him stand out. In 1592, someone finally mentions his name in public writing, and not in a nice way. A jealous writer calls him an upstart crow, like, who does this guy think he is? But honestly, that insult might have helped, because by the time the 1590s move on, Shakespeare is everywhere. He's writing histories like Henry VI. Then comes the real hit, Romeo and Juliet, a story about love, families, and terrible timing. It becomes a classic, and suddenly, Shakespeare is not just known. He's becoming the guy to watch. He joins a theater company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Later, it becomes the King's Men, sponsored by the actual king. Yeah, King James. That's how big he got. They perform in a place called the Globe Theatre. If you lived in London back then, and you wanted drama, laughs, or sword fights on stage, the Globe was the place to be. Imagine watching Hamlet for the first time, or Macbeth, or A Midsummer Night's Dream. All those lines people still quote today heard live, in person, with actors shouting and sweating on a wooden stage. And Shakespeare? He was writing all of it. Not just one play, not two. He wrote over 35 plays and 150 poems, each one with its own vibe, characters, and emotional power. He knew how to write tragedy. He knew how to write comedy. He even mixed both sometimes in the same play. He wasn't writing for rich people only. He was writing for everyone, for the people standing in the cheap seats just as much as the ones in royal boxes. That's what made him different. And that's how he became that guy, the one who turned English theater into something bigger than anyone expected. Let's talk about the actual work, the plays, the words, the reason why people still say Shakespeare was a genius. He wrote in three main styles: tragedy, comedy, and history. His tragedies were deep and dramatic. Plays like Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello. They're full of betrayal, jealousy, and hard choices. His comedies were funny, but not silly. They were smart, full of mix-ups, mistaken identities, and quick wordplay. Plays like Much Ado About Nothing or Twelfth Night. And then there were the history plays. Henry IV or Richard III. These told the stories of kings, wars, and power, but still had emotion and personal drama. But here's what really made Shakespeare different. He understood people, not just royalty or warriors, but real people, how they feel, how they fail, how they fall in love or get angry or make mistakes. And he had this way with language. He could take a simple moment, like someone falling in love, and turn it into a speech you'd never forget. Also, he made up a ton of new words, like real words we still use today. Words like bedroom, lonely, gloomy, swagger, champion, and phrases like break the ice, heart of gold, wild goose chase, all came from him, from his plays, from his words. Now here's something cool for you, especially if you're learning English. You might think, Shakespeare's English is old, so how can it help me now? But the truth is, his writing is like training with weights on. Once you understand the rhythm, the emotion, and the way he used words, your everyday English starts feeling easier, stronger, more natural. It's like listening to music in slow motion. You start to feel the language, not just translate it. Even reading just one monologue or repeating a short quote can improve your flow, your pronunciation, and your confidence. You don't need to understand every word. You just need to feel the tone, and that's what makes Shakespeare powerful even now. Okay, so we know Shakespeare was a writer, a theater guy, and kind of a legend. But there's also some strange stuff about him that most people don't hear in school. Let's start with the big mystery. Did Shakespeare really write all his plays? Most experts say yes, but for years, some people have believed maybe he didn't. Why? Because his education was pretty basic, and he somehow knew so much about history, law, medicine, and even royalty. So the theory is, maybe someone else helped. Some say it was a group of writers. Some say it was a rich nobleman using Shakespeare's name. But again, there's no solid proof, just rumors. Still, it makes the story more fun, right? Now here's a weird one. His name was spelled differently in different places. Sometimes, Shakespeare. Sometimes, Shakespeare. Even Shaxford. Even his own signatures weren't always the same. Imagine not spelling your name the same way every time. That was normal back then. But still, kinda wild. Another fact, he retired early. Like, really early. By his late 40s, he was mostly done with public writing. He bought a big house back in Stratford and chilled out for a few years. Unlike many artists who struggled their whole lives, Shakespeare actually made money. His plays were popular, his company was successful, and he knew how to invest. But the end of his life? Still kind of a mystery. He died in 1616, when he was just 52. We don't know exactly how. Some say he got sick. Some say it was from drinking too much wine at a party. Again, no clear answers. Here's another fun detail. His grave has a message carved on it. It basically says, "Don't move my bones." No joke. It warns people not to dig him up. And guess what? Nobody ever has. His tomb has stayed untouched for over 400 years. Respect. So yeah, Shakespeare was more than a writer. He was also a mystery. And even now, people are still asking questions about who he really was. So, what happened after Shakespeare died? Well, his words didn't. His friends collected his plays and published them. That book was called The First Folio, and without it, we might have lost a big part of his work. Over the years, Shakespeare's plays have been turned into movies, TV shows, books, and school lessons around the world. Even now, people use his lines without realizing it. Ever heard someone say, "All's well that ends well"? Or "the world is your oyster"? Or "in a pickle"? That's Shakespeare, still hiding in your everyday conversations. And here's what's crazy. He did all of that with language. No internet. No video. Just paper, a pen, and a deep understanding of how people think and feel. Now maybe you're thinking, okay, cool story, but what does this have to do with me? Well, if you're learning English, or trying to get better at speaking, or even just looking for confidence when expressing yourself, Shakespeare's proof that words have power. He wasn't born famous. He wasn't a king. He wasn't rich when he started. He was just a kid from a small town who learned how to use language to say something real, something powerful, something people would never forget. So when you sit down to practice English, even if it feels slow, even if you make mistakes, you're building something big. You're learning the tools that help you connect, share your story, and maybe, just maybe, write something that lasts. Shakespeare did it in the 1500s. You're doing it now. And that's the kind of story worth telling.